So my name is Danica, and I am the founder of Danica Inc. because I'm boring and can't name things properly. I am a sociocultural scholar, a kinesiologist, and I have two of my amazing, super awesome specialized colleagues with me here today, Kate and Renee, as well as another super specialized but ghost invisible person, Amanda, who's recording and producing today's conversation so that we can keep it evergreen. So if you do learn something useful, I think it's interesting, you can always share it with friends after the fact, because we want to make sure that resources like this are available to the public. So how we're going to set up the actual nature of the call, we do have the chat box live on the right-hand side of your screen. So if something comes up that you feel like you want to interject on, please do. If you have anything specific that you came for today's conversation, drop it in there right now. It just gives us a better chance of making sure that we address it or weave it into some of the conversational topics that we already have planned for the day. I would love to know who we're talking to. I think that's super important. I already lecture at university when it exists, and that's a pretty boring experience. That's not what I want this to be. I want to talk to people and have a good time. So, not that teaching students is always boring, but I'm just saying. What to expect today. So, just like in the last seminar, our framework for today is intersectionality. Intersectionality is the way by which different factors of your life intersect. I know I shouldn't use the word to define itself, but here we are. And so what that means is that you can have different things like being a woman, being pregnant, being using different hormonal contraceptions, being menopausal, being a person of color, being of low socioeconomic status. All of those things will impact your experience of female health and COVID-19 kind of as they come together. So I'm gonna pass this right off to Kate now so she can introduce herself and why you should listen to her.
Thanks, Danica. So as Danica said, my name is Kate, and I'm a certified athletic therapist, and I also started my education in kinesiology. I'm also the clinical director of Studio D for Danica Incorporated. I moved in kind of the health and wellness through growing my private practice as a new professional, and over the years, I found that I was kind of drawn to working with chronic pain patients and people that may have had barriers when it came to health and wellness. So that could be anything from somebody with a mild traumatic brain injury to somebody like my mom, who lives in a tiny, tiny community in BC and struggles to find resources to help her through either injuries or whatever her goals are. And so this week we're going to be talking about motherhood. And so that is a huge area that has had an influx of barriers throughout the COVID-19 crisis. And we've seen a lot of development of different resources and different barriers that have come up in this area. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And earlier today, I was chatting with a friend of mine who has a 3-month-old little boy. And she is really struggling with finding resources as a new mom. She's at home by herself. She had all these community classes that she was going to go out to, new mom groups, etc. Even seeing her doctor, that was a phone call today. She had a rash on her baby that she wanted to talk to her doctor about, and the doctor didn't have Zoom. So, there's a lot of new barriers for new moms. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit today.
Love that. Okay, there's already so much we can jump off from right there. But let's hop over to Renee. Renee, can you introduce yourself for us?
For sure. So hi everybody, I'm Renee. So I'm part of Danica Inc.'s R&D team, or research and development team. A little bit about my background. I also did kinesiology first, like everybody here apparently. Good job us. And so I specifically researched female athletes at that time. Now I've gone on to do my master's in epidemiology, which is the study of the distribution and the determinants of disease. So very relevant right now. And all through my research has been really grounded in women's health. And this is because historically this area was really grossly underrepresented and understudied due to reasons like complexities of the menstrual cycle and so on is like the number one reason they've historically excluded women in research. This is not okay with me. I think that there should be more of it. And so all of the research to date that I've done and hopefully will continue to do has really been grounded in women's health and those health, life, and outcomes experienced by women.
Beautiful. All right, so a really great thing that we learned in the last piece is that sometimes when you're talking about medicalized information, it can be really depressing. And so I wanted to like start this conversation off with a caveat. We're not sharing necessarily sad or challenging information to be like, ooh, this is so scary and frightening. Look at us being alarmist. That's not the purpose here. Really, genuinely, especially as researchers and clinicians, the idea is always that knowledge provides power. It's a way to be able to, if you know this, if you have access to resources. I know Kate was a actual goddess today and compiled a whole bunch of resources for us that we're going to link in the chat box. But the point is that when you know, you're better able to act and kind of know where your barriers are so that you can mitigate them a little bit more easily. That's my caveat. That is the golden thread today. Knowledge is power. I don't know. And like, you know that meme that's like, the more you know, we need that. So that all said, Kate, you mentioned earlier about struggling to find resources, and I wanted to come back on that and just like go to the intersectionality of barriers to resource. And Renee has a really great story that ties into barriers to resources and some of the complexities around intersecting components of a person's life.
Over to me. So I got permission from my sister to share the story. And so she is a new mom. We're all very excited. I love my niece. But she lives, or traditionally or normally lives, in this kind of multi-generational house, right? So she lives with her in-laws and so on. And when COVID-19 kind of hit Calgary, they were not able to social distance as well as my sister kind of felt was necessary or wanted for her 5-6-month-old baby. And so she decided to uproot herself and her child and move in with our mom instead, so that they could actually social distance kind of the way that she wanted to. So choosing to kind of leave your normal home because you're not sure how safe it was feeling. But so this happened a couple of weeks ago now. I talked to her the other day, and this has now gone on to the fact that other grandparents want to see my niece. And even though they're family, does COVID-19 really care if you're family? It will still infect the next person. And now she's kind of dealing with that next step of how do we social distance when it's a new grandchild in the family?
And I think this speaks so much too. So like, just as a heads up to everyone, we're not just going to talk about babies today. We're going to specifically emphatically talk about not babies as well. Women's health is more than just making children. But I think with that, I just think that speaks to her ability to move, her ability to have family resources in the area that she can go to, but also the power dynamic in like, I am leaving my partner, and I'm going to go to another house, and I'm going to leave my partner and his family with this new human we made, and I am a strong, independent woman, and I'm going to do that. Like that's a lot of agency taking. I think that's so amazing. And when we even talk about like, do we want to bring the grandparents up? Do we want to grandparent shame? Because it's not what we're intending to do. We thought about not mentioning it. And then Kate was like, I talked to all these women today. Do you want to lean into a little bit more about those conversations, Kate?
Yeah, I reached out to about 5 new moms that I knew personally or through other people this week, and just tried to get their experience and what they're dealing with right now. And, you know, these people have children, babies from the age of kind of 2 months old to 2-3 years old. And everybody's experiencing kind of different difficulties and barriers, but some of the common threads, and, you know, the first one that comes up is, you know, the grandparents and our support team and the people that want to be part of that, you know, young human's life, especially at the beginning. And how do we overcome those barriers and be part of, you know, this new family member's life when, you know, we can't see them, and when it might not be safe for the baby, but it might not also be safe for the grandparents. You know, it goes both ways. And so, you know, each and every single one of those moms that I talked to this week were like, yeah, this is a huge problem. We can't see our grandparents. They're usually part of our support system. We want them to be part of our child's life. And, you know, one of the parents said, you know, we did Zoom for my son's 2nd birthday with his grandparents, and it was a disaster because my son didn't understand why his grandparents were on the screen and why he couldn't see his grandparents, and it was a full-on meltdown. So even some of the ways that we're overcoming barriers in other aspects of this COVID-19 crisis, you know, that doesn't necessarily work for a young child. And, you know, there's other ways that that has to be worked around, or maybe it can't be worked around.
Yeah, because healthfulness isn't just like, oh, am I exposed to this illness? It's, am I able to take control of my living situation? Am I able to limit my own exposure? Am I able to not work? Is my partner working? Like, if you guys, I said this already a few minutes last week, where we really dive into like how all these different intersecting components work together, especially when you have a new child and there's like socially just so much around that, it's really hard to minimize those risks that you're starting to expose yourself as a parent or as a new mom. But going from there around risk mitigation and family access, even one of the inspiring stories that kind of like led us into like, okay, wonky stuff is happening right now, and it's been mitigated since then. And I was like, I needed to find evidence that this actually happened, because it had just come from a pregnant woman who was terrified. In Ontario, they had forced epidurals. So they had said, if you're coming to our hospital, you have to have an epidural. And so the component of consent was mitigated, because from a health professional standpoint, it was too risky to not have these women have epidurals, because if they needed to have C-sections later on, it became a clinical complexity, and they didn't want to have that. And so women in Ontario, understandably, were like, excuse me, what is going on? And since then it's been mitigated, but there's also sort of like systemic risk things that start to perk up and populate, including when we talk about the family things in New York, they banned all family, period, still not allowed, from being there when you're birthing. And there's it can be a really traumatizing experience. And so I think it's, I don't know, I guess I'll hand it over to the clinician and the researcher who does things on clinicians. Like, are there changes that you're seeing in how clinical practice is being run for women who are going through the birthing process? Okay, you guys can arm wrestle digitally.
Hey, go for it.
Okay. Yeah, so the actual birthing process, I mean, we've seen a lot of changes. A friend of mine just had her baby yesterday as a preemie, 6 weeks early. And there's a huge implication to that, especially leading up to it when they knew that she might be giving birth early. One person was allowed to be there with her, you know, so her mom, her husband, you know, this team that she'd been configuring and making a birth plan for was scratched. She was only allowed to have her husband in the room with her. And then after the fact, it gets even more complicated, because now we have a preemie baby and nobody's allowed to come in. Visitation is not a thing in the hospital. So now she's by herself in the hospital recovering from a C-section and with this baby, and, you know, the visitation rates aren't there. So she's trying to work through this time with her family and without her support system, because we can't have people coming in and out, especially onto a ward like that where there's any risk. So there's no visitation rates at all. And I think that's a huge change in that culture and that dynamic. And it's kind of unavoidable. And so these moms are trying to work through this and figure out other ways to get that support system.
Yeah. Renee, is there anything you want to add to that?
I'm kind of spiraling here a little bit, but one thing I wanted to clarify that my sister was lucky enough that her husband was able to actually go with her. And so when you're talking about, support systems not being in there in the hospitals, I can only imagine. But was really interesting from her perspective was that it's nearing kind of the end of her maternity leave, but now because of this whole scenario, both parents actually get to be there all the time. And so that was a really kind of weird twist on, okay, she actually has, I guess, more direct support from her partner really cool. Than she would if he was, you know, commuting to work then every day and so on. And so there's that one little silver lining that maternity life has kind of, that's changed, right?
Yeah.
That both parents are forced to be at home if they're both parents. Yeah.
And there's full-time care. Obviously, if your child isn't as a baby, an infant, it's still nice to have both parents home at this time. Whether or not that changes the traditional gender dynamics in a given household, obviously, I can't. Well, I can speak to that, but I didn't do enough research to speak to that currently. But I think there's an opportunity for exposure to different ideas with both parents being home. Cortisol levels obviously being a thing I have questions about for just like long term and having everyone home and who's taking on the extra load of like educating a child. That's a huge thing. It's not women's health specific enough, so I'm not gonna like go down there, but I do think that having both parents home is a really unique cultural opportunity, and I'm interested to see where that goes. Okay, we're trying really hard. Last week our feedback was like, you make everything sound awful. We were like, so silver linings. Thank you, Renee, for the silver lining. So we're talking about babies, we're talking about birthing babies, we're talking about children. I'd really like to talk into not babies, definitely explicitly trying not to have babies. As we were prepping for this call, Renee made a beautiful point that I will let her elucidate because I think it's super important.
I can hear Kate laughing in the background of this already. So in the terms of not having babies, birth control is something that is currently used by lots of people, but it's also something that insurance companies only let you get 3 months worth of at a time. And so because of this, and because COVID-19 and kind of restrictions and social distancing may last longer than those 3 months, what are people going to do? Are we going to see a change in kind of the like, can you just send it to my house, please? Or is there going to be that kind of need to actually still go in and get it? And is that an extra risk then that people that are actively trying not to have babies are going to take?
Yeah. Right, and you get a risk exposure that's really unique to populations that actively trying not to have kids. I think one of the things really interesting to hear as well is, so I have really bad endometriosis, and I currently, after my last miscarriage, I'm not able to use hormonal birth control. And so we have to use condoms right now. And so in like week 1 or 2 of me self-isolating at home, I was like, okay, I've had condoms break before. The worst thing right now would be like 3 months into this and not be able to find plan B. I'm going to hop into the grocery store and try and get one while I can. And I already couldn't find or have access to them. And when I talked to the pharmacist, they were like, we've been out for weeks, like ever since the hysteria started. And I was like, oh my, like, so if you like risk, sorry, my field of expertise is in risk mitigation. And I was like, oh my God, like that's a really unique and terrifying risk for people who are trying their best to be responsible and not have babies. Like I find that so interesting. I don't remember, Kate, whether or not you had like a point you wanted to add to this. I'm just going to spotlight you and see what happens.
No, not so much. Honestly, it's always interesting to me what things, pop up and have the most relevance for people. And, me and my partner obviously are on the not making babies right now train as well. But as somebody that has IUD, honestly, it had never even crossed my mind I get birth control because it's not something that I need access to. And so it's a good reminder of just, the complexity of all these situations. They're still multifaceted to even just your own experience.
Yeah, no, I totally feel that. And I think one of the other interesting components of like the trying not to have babies power dynamic thing for me is actually around legal rights. As a immunocompromised person, I can't go get my own. And so in order for me to be able to have access to birth control right now, if I was to run out, I'm using condoms right now, so like whatever, I would have to legally give my husband power of attorney to go get my medications for me. And so if you were a person who didn't know what power of attorney was, or how to get it, or have a lawyer on hand, or be able to afford that, like there's actually quite a bit there in terms of like just class systems and barriers to access around that, which I find terrifying and fascinating. And I won't go too far into the US one. I talked to Amanda about this before, but not having access to money, not having access to birth control, and the states in the US banning abortions as non-essential services, like it's all crazy. It's so interesting where the hits on women's health come in first. I didn't spend a ton of time researching it. Like, we can have a full conversation on this. I do want to shift this into like a question and answer or like less formal conversation piece. But one thing I do really want to address here as well, that women's health isn't just reproductive health, but that was the focus this week. Next week, we're talking about chronic and acute health issues that women often deal with, or that might just be going on in general in people's lives right now, and how that changes under COVID-19. But also specifically even within the realm of reproductive health right now, menopause is obviously a huge part of reproductive health, and something that's unfortunately also chronically understudied. I went in to prep for this call to find those resources and could not. If I find anything, I might send them to Nat, the owner of the studio that we're hosting this through. But that's terrifying to me. Like the fact that I went out as a medical person who knows how to research and look for these things, the resources are super limited right now. So if anyone does have any resources from menopausal women, drop them in the chat box. Save us all, provide us with some information, because Lord knows medical intervention is a desired thing often for women going through menopause. And it's hard to get right now. It's hard to get on the best of days. So that all being said, wow. I love Amanda's comment on just like, I think that was around the IUD, right? Not thinking of birth control because you're able to get access to slightly better healthcare. Yeah, let's turn this into the chat box. If you have comments, questions, concerns, things you want to make sure we hit on today, please drop some comments, and we'd love to hear from you. But do either of you want to hop into the, like, this is a bit of a doozy of a topic, like of the IUDs versus the pill versus physical barriers conversation around access? Because one of the things that might change is, like, I can send my husband to go get condoms, but I couldn't send him to get, like, pills if I needed those. Do you see a difference in access to care based off of the products that you're using for reproductive health? That's a random question.
I'll wait and see if anything pops up in the chat box, but like just kind of where my mind went with that is that people using IUDs, right? They're probably not as concerned that it's kind of a longer term thing. It's not the whole like, oh my goodness, 3 months at a time issue. But then I also think about when, they have a sense to talk it, but like when people or women first start having sex and they're younger, they typically don't go straight to IUDs, right? And so then is there an extra bit of vulnerability there about kind of teenagers, young adults, etc., who would typically go for something like the pill or whatnot? Maybe that's changed, but are they particularly at risk of either pregnancy or going out to expose themselves to get those resources still?
Right? Especially when, Kate, you were saying that like young moms are having a hard time accessing the doctors for just routine things. I can't imagine being in a vulnerable situation and trying to get my parents to take me to the doctor for some unknown reason.
Yeah. Well,
like that.
I know lots of doctors have kind of put statements out saying, you know, please don't come in unless you need to. And that's a very subjective sentence to put out there because, you know, as a young female teenager with their parents or without their parents, you know, is that person going to feel like they can step forward, and is that an acceptable thing to come into the doctor for right now?
Yeah. No, the justification of like, do we need this? Do we need to come in? I think that's really tough. One of the things that everyone had a laugh because when everyone kind of was signing in who was going to be participating in the panel today, I was Googling unintrusive gynecological surgical procedures, and I was like, those words are paradoxical and do not belong in the same sentence together. And it was the same thing as like, if you do not need a laparoscopy for your endometriosis, which I have, and I have very bad, and I've had a laparoscopy for it before, you're like, you should probably not have it unless you're writhing on the floor in pain, which is something I do probably about once or twice a day, but for short periods. And I know it's surgery time when I'm there for 2 hours sweating. And they were like, yeah, just like, if you can handle that, just stay home. And I was like, okay, Renee and I know each other from sport, and I'm a stubborn person. Like, how long on the floor should I be sweating before it's a necessary operation? Like, I think it's, especially when women tend to downplay their own experiences of reproductive health, right? Like, I wasn't diagnosed with endometriosis until I was much older because my mom told me, yeah, your periods are gonna be awful because that's normal, so were mine. And then finally in my 20s, I was like, Mom, that's not normal. Should I go to doctor. Like, so I think the idea of like need is a really interesting and challenging one, especially when women already face so much reporting bias in medicalized settings. I think I just got a bit jargony there, but I feel like that made sense. Renee, do you want to, as a person who does like reporting bias, do you want to contribute anything there?
I think, right, like this is such a hard and new topic, especially like in the research world, which is so sad. But right, like we like to go in this kind of circle that I've mentioned earlier, right, where we're saying that there isn't enough research on women to include them in certain things, general medical, and it's changing. It is changing. And then because we don't have that research, it feeds into but we don't know this, and then we don't have the research. And so this idea of come in when it's too bad, that's all there is right now, right? And so that's also tricky, and it sucks, right? Like
you just sum up the state of women's health in 2 words. Not just shoot any shots, but I'm gonna. All right. If you don't have any other questions coming from the chat box, there are a ton of resources for young parents specifically, or new parents dumped into there. If that doesn't suit you and that's not your need, you're always welcome to reach out to us privately or through the company. It's admin at Danica Inc. for like the general. And if you want to reach out to any of us on a one-on-one basis, it's our name at danicainc.com. And you can contact us there. I know sometimes, especially around female health, it can feel scary to put yourself out there and be like, hi, something appears to be wrong. Ooh, resources for domestic violence. So I actually have a few of those. I don't have them. Let me go into here now. Are you Alberta-based person who just asked? Ooh. I don't have anything really special here for domestic violence, but I do have this here. And I know there are a lot of, oh no, I sent it privately to everyone.
We do have some resources on that. That was something that came up today when I was doing my research in general, just on today's topic. And unfortunately, that is something that's on the rise right now. And so it's really important that there are resources out there. And so I did found a couple. I wasn't sure if we were going to get to talking about it today. It's kind of a big can to open. So what we can do is I can get those resources off to whoever needs them. I'm not sure if there is an email that we can reach you by, or if you want to reach out to that email that we dropped in the link there, admin@danicainc.com. That actually goes to me. And so if you want to send me an email, I'm happy to send those resources along.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We definitely talked about tackling the topic of domestic violence in this space, because we do know we're at the 5 minutes. If anyone needs to sign off, you can pop out. We'll go a little over. Zoom will let us. Is that it is a really unfortunate thing that comes along with, unfortunately, downturns in the economy. Any time in which toxic masculinity is threatened. And people tend to react, especially unfortunately, statistically more likely males to female partners than any other population, which is really scary. And so when we have things like that happening, healthcare obviously becomes a really big concern, because women are afraid of leaving their houses. They don't want to get into trouble. There's nowhere for them to go. So I do know that Canada did come up with some really specific resources and vision around this, which I really appreciated the proactivity of that. And I know Alberta has some too. So Kate, if you've compiled some resources, we will send them along as well. Thank you so much for bringing this up as personal get to know Danica time. I ran away from home at 16 from an abusive family because my mom wasn't leaving and I had to. And so I know how scary it is to decide to walk out the door. So to the person who spoke up in the chat box, thank you for being brave, and especially if you have a family, they super value that. Okay, well, that was somber. So thank you for joining us today. We will be here at 4:30 next Thursday. We will be talking about chronic and acute illness and the intersectionality of that with COVID-19. If you have anything else you want us to talk about or you think is really pressing or urgent in these times, please don't be afraid to send us a link or an email and let us know what you think is important, because that's what we're here for. Awesome. Have a great evening, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Bye.